Hi, I'm Tony Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy. Hi, I'm Tony Williams, and welcome to this episode of Brooklyn Savvy. We're going to be talking about breastfeeding and the intersection of public policy, cultural norms, and community leadership with two fantastic experts. We have Dr. Aletha Maybank, your Assistant Commissioner of Department of Health, and then we have our Councilman Robert Cornegy.
Who is a man?
Who is a man? Hey, and a very tall man. But we're going to be talking about something that's really important, and I thought that where we might want to start is, you know, the United States tops the charts in terms of stigma, in terms of breastfeeding and public breastfeeding. Would you care to comment on that, Mr. Cornegy?
I think it's tremendously unfortunate that that's where we find ourselves as supposed to be one of the most civilized and evolved cultures. So I think, you know, it's very unfortunate that this is where we find ourselves. So we have to step out and really make a change.
So what do you think's driving it?
Well, I think there are many factors. We have to look at history that drives, and when we look at communities of color, especially in our rates, we might have really high initiation rates, so rates in which, you know, we first start breastfeeding, but then they tend to drop, where they're lower than most communities across the country. So the history of, we were talking earlier about slavery and how that's impacted and how many slaves actually had to breastfeed the white children.
Absolutely,
And so when formula really came around, you know, in the 40s and 50s, then it was an idea and women were going to work and there were all these other policies that were actually supporting women to go to work. It became a very affluent thing to have formula. And many African Americans then thought in a strive to have formula and thought that would be the better thing and the best thing because that's what white women were able to do and had access to. And so we now have a situation in which many communities and many young people are very disconnected. They've never seen anybody breastfeed at all. And one of the times that, you know, I'm a pediatrician, and naturally you would think that I was trained to really promote breastfeeding. At the time that I was a pediatrician, we really didn't have that strong message. We knew, yes, you say you can advocate for breastfeeding, but it didn't really happen. And what really struck me was Katrina, Hurricane Katrina. And there was a family that was stuck on the roof, and they had a 1-week-old baby. By the time they got the baby, they had to take the baby to the emergency room and to the hospital. The baby died. The baby died of dehydration. Mom ran out of formula, but there was never that thought to put the baby on the breast to feed.
Oh, wow, that's tragic.
It is tragic. And so we have that level of disconnection. But then there are also policies that have really inhibited us as women, especially, to be able to breastfeed. We go to work, and it's challenging for many different reasons. And then we have the cultural and social norms around perceptions about what are breasts here for.
Well, it was really interesting when I nursed, and you know, this is going back some 20 years ago, I made sure that my kids accepted the breast as well as the bottle because I felt very inhibited to nurse in public. You know, and the first time that occurred to me, I was like, oh, I better get these kids on the bottle because I just do not feel comfortable sharing what I saw as an intimate moment. But as we've spoken about prior to the show, that was like mental conditioning on my part, so to speak.
It had to do with cultural norms and, you know, being from the South, you know, be as conservative,
Absolutely,
be as together,
cover up.
and exactly, and so that contributed a lot to it, I imagine. And
then also, too, you know, breasts are seen as, you know, sex objects.
Why are you telling me?
Well, you know what I mean.
I think clearly we live in a very puritanical society, and so the idea that you would see a breast, kind of the fact that we're so aroused by the sight of a breast is ridiculous. I mean, if you think about even the awards ceremony where someone's nipple showed and how much coverage that got.
Right.
So really, as a society, we have to understand the very essential part of breast. So as a man, I'm pleased to support the idea and to provide a reasonable accommodation for women returning back to work where they can either express milk and store it or nurse their children. When this whole idea of first foods came about and nutrition, so we fight really hard from a city council perspective to make sure that there's not food deserts for underserved communities. And I'm thinking to myself, while we're doing that, the most natural first food is being overlooked.
Absolutely.
So the ability from a public policy perspective to get that in order and to begin a natural nutritional track seemed the easiest thing to do. So I'm pleased to do that.
I would just add, though, that while we are thinking about that, we have to keep in mind what is available in our communities, because the breast milk is created by, is based a lot on what the mother is putting into her body.
Right,
So
and
we've
how
gotta
much she
come
has
at it
available
right.
to give. Right.
Right?
Right, so
we've
then
gotta-
that means also making sure that she is staying healthy and that she
Exactly,
is
and
making
that
sure
she
that
is
so
available.
that you're passing through the nutrients in a healthy
Well,
way.
and that's the perfect thing about connecting it. We talk about, we've heard in Brooklyn especially about food justice, and
Right.
it's kind of the first food justice piece to it as well, that every woman should feel comfortable to breastfeed her, and it's New York State law actually, that a woman is allowed to, it's her right to breastfeed anywhere that she chooses, and that employers also need to provide
But do
space.
police protect that right? Meaning, aren't there instances where women will be asked to remove themselves from establishments, but yet it's your right? Meaning,
We
it's
know
so,
there are
Right.
instances where that happens, but that a lot has to do with what education is out there, the culture of what they're used to and what people know. And so, our
And
role
people feeling empowered to be able to
to
stand
speak
up
up.
on that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
This is my right and I have the
Absolutely.
right
Right.
to do this here.
And that's the goal of the breastfeeding empowerment zone, but we can
No,
just
I
add.
have to tell you that when I started looking into this and thinking about this whole situation, it disturbed me a great deal because it would occur. All of us were born. I mean, all of us have been in that situation where we were little and we had to, parents fed us and nursed us. It has to be one of the most important things that happens to us. And to get the proper nutrition in the beginning makes such a difference in the way that children grow and develop, that I don't see that we have a society that supports that supports making it as easy as possible for parents to go back to work because they have to, and still be able to take care of their children. I'm going to tell you, I didn't nurse my daughter. And when you were talking just now, that came back to me. I was afraid. I knew I had to go back to work. I was afraid that it would be inconvenient for me. And as a result, I've regretted it. So,
And so a lot of it has to do with the education, the community,
Absolutely.
and how breastfeeding is it respected, is it embraced, is it promoted? If that happens, then you're gonna get on board. You're gonna be a
Absolutely.
part of.
Because I'm thinking about it too. I breastfed because of my sister who had a baby a year before I did breastfed, and was talking about all the benefits. So let's talk a little bit about this empowerment zone.
Well,
Changing culture, essentially. You're changing
we're just glad
a
to be
community culture. Yes.
We're glad in my office to be a part of the empowerment zone, and as a component to that, we've been able to provide, like I said, my office had a chance. As a legislator, you get a chance to do two things: you either legislate or you model. We actually had a chance to do both.
Oh, wonderful.
So we had a chance to follow the state legislation that you've mentioned for reasonable accommodation for returning and around the state. We have the first office. The first public lactation station in the city,
Now,
not just in city government.
So what is a public lactation station?
A public
for those who
lactation
may not
station
know?
means that no matter where you are in central Brooklyn, if you have the need or urge to nurse or express milk, so we extended it past just
Because
nursing.
when you may need to express.
Right. So for here in Central Brooklyn, if you're enjoying an afternoon with your family at Food Town shopping or at Applebee's or in the Billie Holiday Theater, you can leave if you feel. And we're not saying that people should leave to come and use it, but if you feel comfortable doing that, we believe that you should nurse in place. So wherever you are, if you're on the bus, you shouldn't have to get off the 25 or the 26 to come upstairs to nurse.
Was
And
not
it's your absolute right.
convenient, but it may become convenient. It
Right.
didn't
So,
feel
but
convenient to me.
as the social norms begin to evolve and
Yes.
change, there'll be more of that. But in the interim, we wanted to provide a safe, quiet, clean space to be able to do that. And I got to be honest, mine came out of the fact that my wife, who nursed our children, was frowned upon as someone in a community who wanted to have some stance and prominence in the community. Her husband and I, we were in a leadership role, and were kind of not encouraged to continue that practice if we were going to be in the public eye. Which anybody who knows my wife knows that now she probably wanted to have more children just so she could nurse. to prove her point. And 6 children later, she was able to.
But that's a very important thing.
It is very important.
And it's really the role of leadership. And as far as the empowerment zone, which I will say it's funded by the Kellogg Foundation because that's important. But the idea is that we're taking the zip code of Bed-Stuy and working on multiple levels of saturating the message so that we can change the norm. So we are fortunate to have the leadership of the councilman because that's very unique actually across the country. But we're also working with retail. So we're working with the business and the bids because there is actually a business case for breastfeeding that the former Surgeon General Regina Benjamin created. She created a toolkit for that. But we're also working with the faith-based organizations. And we have created a faith-based organization breastfeeding toolkit. And we're working on training folks within, and it's only not just churches, but also mosques and synagogues within the Bed-Stuy area.
Dr. Maybank, what is in the toolkit?
Well, the toolkit has, it's a folder and it has a list of ways and steps that the institutions can take or make in order to start implementing it. So they have posters that create signage that they can put up, but they also even provide messages that they can put into their bulletins or they can say from the pulpit if it's pulpit, but it's not just churches again, it's also mosques and synagogues. But it's important to remember that we actually spend time with the faith institution beforehand. We don't just hand over the toolkit and expect them to do what they got to do. And so, yeah, it takes some conversation.
Right.
And we also provide, fans. We provide blankets. We provide
Blankets?
we provide a screen as well if the institution, wants a screen in order to put somewhere. But some faith institutions are definitely on the front line and saying no, mom can breastfeed right in the sanctuary if she wants to and chooses to. But it's a good process, and I think that the whole idea of the empowerment zone is just working on these multiple levels.
And what are some of the other things that the empowerment zone brings to the community?
Right, so the retail piece that I mentioned, we're actually working here with ShopRite, Food Town, oh my goodness.
Thanks for getting that right.
I know.
I
I know, with Food Town, and they're going to be putting breastfeeding signs up. So we have this sign called Breastfeeding is Welcome Here. Right. So the idea is that any retail setting, any business setting, to put in the window so that it becomes branded that breastfeeding is welcome here. And so we're doing that with Food Town. We're going to be doing that with the restaurant right here, Applebee's as well.
So can I just make an admission?
Yes.
I like this. I like what I'm hearing. But I am going to tell you that, as someone who breastfed 16 and 12 years ago and had to cover up, I feel like, like when I do see a woman who isn't covered up, I have to go, oh, okay, that's where we are.
Right.
Right? Like, it's not a
with you.
negative, but
Right.
it's like I have to remind myself,
That's where we
we've
are.
evolved.
We've
That's
moved
where we
on.
are.
Yeah,
And I imagine there are a lot of people out there who feel the same.
I share the exact same sentiments, Of course, because I covered up or I didn't do it out in public, but society is moving along. Right. And is part of this also because of the fact that you've got a broad immigrant community here too, as well?
Well, really the goal of the empowerment zone was that there was a racial inequity, that existed, and that Black and Latino communities just weren't breastfeeding longer for many different reasons. There were so many conversations. I've heard it, even WIC, who is one of the largest formula providers in this country, recipients of WIC, and I've heard women say this, that their moms received WIC, when they were growing up, so they're entitled to get WIC. So why shouldn't they have formula? So it's really
It's back to that entitlement thing
And
and income issues.
and the income issues. But as the councilman said, there are so many economic advantages, and if you think about emergency preparedness, you will definitely have breast milk, and so I think we have to frame the message in a way that meets people where they're at. Yeah.
And I'm thinking about, infant mortality in this particular community. What role or how did that work into this whole area of the empowerment zone? I'm sure the data is not in terms of if it's making a difference, but isn't that was that a consideration, of course, I would imagine?
Absolutely. I mean, when we talk about breastfeeding, we're talking about the wellness of the family, and the wellness of the child in the context of family, so that if we're starting to have conversations about breastfeeding and how do you take care of them, and we're engaging men in that process and they're becoming part of leadership, that really just helps provide support all around. You talked about, you had a lot of support. Support is a big reason, a deal breaker really, if moms are able to breastfeed or not.
And I think the more that you create environments where people feel comfortable doing it openly, then they gain support from others. They see role models, like people become role models for them who otherwise might not.
But I also wanted to add, though, that the consistent messaging and when all stakeholders are on the same page, so even having the hospitals decrease the amount of accessibility to formula to young mothers who are just having, that was almost like
That
a
seems
drug.
scary
You're
in a
giving
way,
them,
though.
you're giving people
Is
so
that
much
not,
for
is
free.
that not scary?
But
I'm just wondering.
to support, so if we're
Right.
not just taking it away without providing them the guidance.
But it's the way that they did it. I know when my wife was in the hospital, it was so free and accessible. And then you get out in the real world with your child and it's expensive. But they almost, they don't force it on you, but it's so free and
there are
accessible.
some hospitals where they withhold the formula, where they don't want they want the mother to breastfeed.
But that's where that inequity is, because in communities of color, it's the opposite.
Right. That's exactly what I'm
Let's
saying.
say though, in New York City, the New York City Department of Health, and we've really taken a lead in this, is so we have a program called Latch On.
Yeah, the Latch
And
On
it's a
program.
voluntary program in which we've asked the hospitals to actually to think through their practices of just providing formula right off the bat, and to not have it initially, but to really support, and as you mentioned, to make sure that there is counseling available at all given times so that they can actually encourage moms to breastfeed, support moms to breastfeed while they're in the hospital. And we have, a lot of hospitals have signed on. We definitely could get more. But there are definitely challenges with that as well, to be honest. The message is out there and we're clear what we want to support, but sometimes we have to think about staff and where staffing is at, and we have different hospitals from what their cultural background is and how supportive. So it's, it's a process.
And I have to share this story too, because I went to Litch, and I had a nurse educator who was there with me almost nonstop because she just liked the fact that I was so passionate about nursing. And it took a while to understand how to do it. It wasn't as natural as I thought it would be for the first child. The second child, absolutely no problem, but I would say it took a good 6 weeks. My sister would say, that seems to be the worst time between you and your son right there.
One other challenge that we have to bring forward.
Yes.
And that is that, many perceive breastfeeding, many in our community, as something that holds you back. If you're breastfeeding, then you can't get out and get back on with your life. And that's something that we also have to work through, sometimes especially with younger parents. I want to get back out there, and so the formula, so-and-so can take care of my baby.
Right, exactly.
And so that's when the pumping and the expressing your milk and helping them to appreciate, you can still go and do what you want to do.
I wonder about teen moms or young moms, what you're right to your point, you can express the milk and that can help with that, but mothers need to understand the kind of bonding that is created. What are the benefits? Talk to us a little bit about the benefits, because we're going to help sell this program.
Texting them.
Right. Yeah,
Before
I'll give
you
it
do that, I just
okay,
wanna say
let's
there's a concern, though, about how fathers in the initial stages of a child's life don't get to participate. And that, I don't know if that's an excuse for it, but it's been, so when we have our support conversations as men, that often comes up as, what do we do? We're kind of standing on the sidelines,
that's
waiting
right.
for an
You can't feed the
opportunity to
to be with the baby.
The
Yes.
value of expressing the milk so that then the father can still
Absolutely.
be able to feed the child.
Bib.
Yeah,
the
nobody's
father's
gonna
bib.
wear that.
And I heard my
Nobody's
husband was
gonna
like,
wear
you want
that.
to know what? And so it was like, I was supposed to express the milk, and then he was supposed to put on this bib and hold it up here. And he was like,
No,
I will feed the baby, but
I had instances where my husband would hold it, but he'd go, they call it Rudy, and I'm like, hey, man, stop.
Yeah, exactly.
But the benefit, yes.
That's what but that is a benefit, I think, also on the family side of it as well, and it's
the family, not just the mother.
absolutely, but I think the bonding that happens not just with mother and child, but the opportunity for it to happen with everybody, whatever, their family structure is. But benefits, obesity, we know for both childhood obesity as well as for the mother, we know her weight can go down. Postpartum depression, another big outcome. Bonding, as you said. There are a lot of benefits also for women that people don't realize, and one of them is, and we're getting more and more research about this, is the decrease in ovarian and certain types of breast cancer.
Yes, yes.
And so I think there are a lot of things that, in the emergency preparedness and the economic benefits, but there are multiple.
I was sharing with you, when I was breastfeeding my daughter, there were reports coming out saying that breastfeeding can contribute to greater brain development.
Yes, I remember that,
and,
yes.
greater memorization skills.
Right.
And then the other thing was that the way that the nipple is positioned in the mouth, it helps with teeth formation and can promote greater teeth, like healthier teeth and greater formation. And so I was sharing that my daughter has perfect teeth, and I didn't pay a whole lot of money for them, and she's got excellent memorization skills, and it was 2 years of breastfeeding.
Yeah, well, yeah,
But
definitely.
I got to ask
But
you, is it true? Because we went on the premise that also as a positive health outcome, there were less ear infections.
So there are less ear infections.
My daughter
We
never
didn't-
had
we
an ear
actually didn't have any
infection.
ear
Never
Right,
had
right.
one.
So
Yeah,
infection, I was
yeah.
going to say the immunity piece is also very
Very
big,
important,
and it
right.
helps the immune system.
Especially
So
the
ear
first 2 weeks I was
infections,
hearing, or the
asthma,
first
yeah.
6 weeks. It was like if you can't do
Because
any other
that's when-
breastfeeding, that's the most
right,
important time.
Because that's when a lot of the immunity aspects of mother's breast milk is really passed through those first weeks. And so even allergies and eczema, all of those we know definitely children are less likely to suffer from those issues when they are breastfed.
So talk to us about, has this caught on, this whole empowerment zone?
I think, as with anything, whether it's a negative campaign or a positive campaign, there's a consistency that's necessary to get a message across. And I think that now it's gaining momentum, so other people are signing on, including men. So I think, no, has it reached where we'd like the outcome to be? But I think it's on the road to that. When you have all stakeholders in the community, when you have your businesses, when you have men, women, and everybody
Churches.
really, and churches, and I was reluctant to bring that up because we have some work to do within the church.
Right.
But when you have all of those stakeholders, then it becomes an eventuality, and it's just a natural progression, and it becomes a behavior.
And we're supporting women in the home as well. We have kind of beefed up, in a sense, I don't know if that's the right word, but increased our level of providing home services. So our newborn home visiting program, we also have our doula program. So the idea is, in order for an empowerment zone, it's like an empowerment zone, an economic empowerment zone, you have to saturate the area. You have to really get the message out on multiple levels. We'll be working with media as well, and probably doing a campaign for men.
Dr. Maybank, talk to us about the Pregnancy Fairness Act.
Right, so it was passed in New York City this year, and so this is really to help prevent pregnancy discrimination. So, and it's one of those, I think about, well, why wouldn't we think about this beforehand? But really what it provides is the woman, if she's pregnant, the opportunity to have more breaks at her work and not get penalized for doing so. If she is in an environment in which she's standing all day, that she has access to a stool. So it's really providing spaces and accommodation for a pregnant woman so her life is easier. I'm reading a book called Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And the way she starts off the book was about how she never as women, we don't even realize how difficult it is for us on a day-to-day basis. Because sometimes it becomes unconscious. There's some level of unconsciousness that comes about it.
We just
talks
accept
about,
it.
Absolutely, because she talks about how she was pregnant, how she would have to go so far in the parking lot. And then it was her husband one day, he said, well, why don't you ask for her to have a pregnancy space close by? Because that other company does that. So there's a lot that we have internalized. And I think these acts in this empowerment zone is about how do we empower ourselves.
Do you think businesses are they willing to take pregnant women on? Meaning, anytime you ask a business to do a little more to accommodate, there's always the risk that they find other ways to not participate.
Well, I definitely feel like that's the challenge, but the reality is that this is the act and this is the law, and there are some protections out there now for women.
And does it matter based on size of business, or is it any business?
It's four employees or more, I believe, is what the law states. So if you're a business with 4 or more employees,
Then
this law applies to you.
And it's worded in a way, it's a reasonable accommodation.
Right.
So there's an expectation that if it's reasonable, the same way we have a reasonable accommodation for women who are expressing milk. So you have to provide an environment, you have to provide enough break time, you have to provide not to lift heavy boxes if that's part of your job. And the reason it's 4 and above is because it's unreasonable that if you have that smaller work staff that you could differentiate between the type of work. So it's a little harder to do when it's under. I got to be honest, that the author of that law is a man, Jimmy Vaca, and I was proud to stand with him. And it actually inspired me to do. I got to be honest, Jimmy inspired me to do what I'm doing because as a man he took that stance. And we all stood with him and around that legislation. And I just felt like it needed to go a little further for women who had already given birth, they needed reasonable accommodation as well.
So it sounds like we are doing many things to change culture around breastfeeding. What can ordinary people do that can just help to reinforce this message?
Right, well, when you see a woman breastfeeding,
Give a thumbs up.
yeah, there you go. Hey, I mean, yeah, you know, but be as supportive as
Right,
you
don't be
possibly can.
disdainful.
Recognize your own personal reaction, because we all have personal reactions to it, because we all are not comfortable sometimes seeing it. But recognize that and kind of, you know, step away. If you're an employer, learn the policies, understand the laws, as we've been doing the Know Your Rights workshops with employers.
That's very important,
Yeah, for them
yes.
to understand what exactly are the laws and how to help them implement the laws into the spaces that they have. But I think the more conversation that we all have about it, that's open, that's honest, the better it is. I see a lot of posts on Facebook, which is also a great thing, I think, and a great medium for having this conversation. And it really brings out where we are. But, you know, when a ball player's wife, which was recently this year, posts a picture of her breastfeeding, and there's all this shock and all, but and at first people are like, well, how could, you know, why are they upset with her? But I said, you know what, this is a good moment for conversation.
This is how change occurs.
Absolutely.
This is how change occurs. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode, but this was really informative. Thank you so much, Dr. Maybank. And
Before
yes.
you
That's
close,
right, there is, yes,
before you
okay,
close,
that's right.
You asked if I thought that this was working.
That's absolutely right.
And I didn't say that there are several offices on the city, state, and federal level who've reached out to us to find out how to do that. The district attorney's office, Ken Thompson, big shout out to him, who's now going to be implementing that, and our borough president is also carving out a space to do it as well.
It's moving. It's moving.
So it's working.
So, yes, we
Oh,
are.
and those are 2 Brooklyn electeds, right? I forgot.
Brooklyn is on board. Yes. But anyway, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you, Aletha, for joining us. And Councilman Cornegy, thank you so much. And thank your wife, Michelle, for being that woman that is out there making a difference.
She's not the boss of me.
We will see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.